Welcome to Sacerdotus Hangouts, the broadcast that answers doubts about God, the Catholic Church, science, philosophy, and other worldly topics without.
Hello, welcome to Sacerdotus Hangouts. On today's broadcast, I'm going to speak or give a review on the special report that aired on CNN yesterday regarding atheists. And it was the first time I've ever seen such a program dedicated to atheism on the network. Atheism has been discussed on other networks, other programming, but not to the extent that it was on CNN. So I watched the report and I have some mixed feelings about it. Overall, atheism was presented fairly well. However, it was also presented as a parody of religion. The report showcased young atheists, one with religious parents and another who is studying at Harvard's Divinity School. It also presented, of course, Richard Dawkins, who they called the father of atheism. I'm not too sure about that. They called him the father of atheism. So I'm not sure what you guys think of that, but I don't really think he's the father of atheism. He's just probably one of the founders or the new atheism, but the founder of atheism, I don't agree with that. Anyhow, he, along with David Silverman of American Atheists, Jerry W. DeWitt, who was a former Pentecostal pastor or minister, and an anonymous Protestant minister who is apparently flirty with atheism. One of the young atheists, named David Gormley, is the son of religious parents who were shocked when he told them that he was an atheist. His parents claim that he became dead to them. Now, I had a bit of a problem with that because I mean, how can you do that to your own son? Even if he comes out to you as an atheist or even gay, lesbian, or something, I don't know. And he's still your son, he's still your baby boy, and you shouldn't consider him dead to you or like he's another person or a stranger that just appeared there. He's still your flesh and blood, your DNA, and you should love him. And while you don't support what he came out into, you have to support him as a person, as a human person, as an individual. So I had a bit of a problem with that statement that their son became dead to them, and especially coming from people who claim to be Christian. I mean, you have to love your neighbor as yourself, and what closer neighbor than your own child? I mean, come on. Jesus came for everybody. He didn't come for the righteous only or for the holy people only. He came for everyone. So you can't just dead people, so to speak, who disagree with you, or especially you're a parent and they come out to you in any way of something that you disagree with, or lifestyle or belief or whatever it may be. That's still your child, and you shouldn't treat them like an outsider, pariah, or outcast. It's unchristian. Anyhow, they still live together despite the tension, and but they're not as close, according to them. Now, David claims that other friends and relatives stopped talking to him altogether, which is again sad and unfortunate that these things have to happen. You shouldn't stop talking to people or treat them like an outcast just because they think differently than you or behave differently than you. If anything, you should be closer to them, when they're going through that phase or transition. Try to be closer to them because your example can make or break everything, especially you're a Christian. So you have to be careful. You can't just treat people who disagree with you in such a negative way. If somebody comes to me, or if I have a child and they come to me and they say that they're an atheist, or they converted to Buddhism or Islam, or came out of the closet, whatever it may be, I'm not gonna hate them or disown them or not. Uh, my Catholic faith, my Christian faith, my Lord and Savior Christ calls me to love and love even more the individual and be merciful. And this is what Pope Francis has been trying to remind all of us in the church and all throughout the world, that we have to be merciful, and that God is the judge. We're not the judge, God is the judge. And this is why he proclaimed next year, starting December 8th, the year of mercy. We can't be all over people, judging them and being harsh with them and so forth. We have to be careful, because again, we can make or break somebody's faith, unfortunately, because that's how interwoven society is, how as a human family we're so connected that we obviously affect each other in different ways. So for a Christian, you have to be extra careful of how you present yourself and how you react to certain situations which you may not like. Now, we all make mistakes, started with me, but we have to try our best. So back to David, he runs a secular club, a humanist club at his university in Georgia, I believe it was, and claims that as a young person, going to church did not make sense to him after spending Wednesdays for 6 to 8 hours praying to God. David felt out of place and decided atheism was for him. The other young person that they featured in the show was Vanessa Solte, and she stated that she studied at Harvard Divinity School, and she said something interesting. She said that religion is part of humanity. That religion is interwoven into the human experience, and we can't do away with it. And she said that a lot of things wouldn't make sense without religion in regards to culture and whatnot. And to a certain extent, she's right. She's correct, because so many things, literature, books, music, all have to do with religion, with God. And if you take God and religion away, then these cultural treasures, they lose a lot. They lose their core. Handel's Messiah. Hallelujah, hallelujah. What was that without religion, without God? Who it loses its flavor if you take out religion and God. So she does have a point regarding that. And excuse the background noises there. And she was raised a Reformed Jew, according to her. So she comes from the Reformed Jewish sect within the Judaism, and said that her family comes from people that survived the Holocaust. And I will talk about that in a little bit. Then they featured Jerry W. DeWitt, who was a Pentecostal pastor who almost ran for mayor, according to him. However, he had deep doubts within himself. While on call to see a parishioner's relative who got into a car accident, DeWitt claims that the event confirmed his atheism. He felt that prayer was useless. Now, this happens a lot. You'll be surprised with priests, deacon, lay people, nuns, anyone. That sometimes we see things and we begin to question why God. And this happens a lot with the death of children. And yesterday, there was a tragic accident with an airplane in France. An airplane crash, and I believe 2 high school classes perished along with their teachers and 2 infants, I believe. And The first thing that comes to my mind or came to my mind when I heard the news was, why God? Why? What did what did these kids do? High schoolers can be a pain and you know what, but still, why would they deserve to die in a plane crash? And infants, yeah, they make a lot of noise, so I think it'll annoy you one up. But they're precious babies. Why should they have to die in such a horrible way? And these are mysteries that we could probably never figure out. And we have all kinds of ideas regarding suffering and how it relates to sin and the passion of Christ and so forth. But it still leaves that unsettled feeling. Why? And this is completely normal. This is, in my opinion, a test of conscience, that we're able to feel remorse and even get angry at God. And it reminds us of our place. And it reminds us of how special humanity is, how special the human person is. That we get to the point that we question the creator of humanity, get angry with him. Why, God? Why? Why do you allow these children to suffer? These plane crashes to kill these people? And it can be difficult. And with terrorist attacks, 9/11 and so forth, people wonder why. My relative, my friend just went to work. They were good people. Why did they have to die with 2 airplanes crashing into the building and so forth? So it happens to everybody. It causes doubts. It makes you question things. And it could be either a good experience or a bad experience, in the sense that you could grow in faith or you could start lacking faith. And the way you grow in faith is that you begin to realize that we don't belong to ourselves. We belong to God. We're part of a contingent nature. We depend on God for existence. We are the breath of God. So, in a sense, God can do what He wants, and He can allow what He wants in nature, and more so because we rejected Him. Adam and Eve said no, disobeyed God, and ate of the fruit of the knowledge of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And that rejection was inherited by us. That the effects of it, of original sin, was inherited by all of us. And we still have that rebellious nature. We want to tell God no, and we find evil and sin and all that more attractive. And it makes more sense to be human, so to speak, and do wild and crazy things. So, what father would listen to a child that's rebellious and out of control? I'm not saying God doesn't listen to anybody, but we give him a lot of reasons not to listen to us and be there for us. And because of this, God is not going to be a Superman flying everywhere, protecting everybody or defending everybody. He does it at will, depending on somebody's faith or depending on the situation or whatever it is that he wants to tell the world through his providence, whatever hint that he wants to give by intervening in a certain thing. Like, for example, a child that was with his mother, and they went off the road and they fell in a river or something, and the car fell upside down, and the mother was killed, but the baby was in this freezing water for hours and suffered hypothermia and whatnot. And as the emergency workers came and were looking at the wreckage and everything, they heard this noise, and it was the baby, the infant, or the toddler. And they took it to the hospital, and this child was perfectly fine, completely fine, after being in that cold water for many hours. I believe it was 12 hours, I'm not sure. And he was perfectly fine. And then a couple months ago, last year, the young girl that survived the plane crash, and she came out of the plane, I believe she had a broken arm. And this is a young child. She didn't have a map with her. She didn't know where she was going. But yet the path that she took through this forest led her to the house of a person who will call the cops and inform them of this plane crash. Otherwise, nobody would have known that this plane crashed and that her family was killed and that she was there injured and probably would have succumbed to her own injury and the weather because it was cold. And yet, this child survived and was guided to this house through this confusing forest. And then recently, there was another child, another baby, who was also involved in the accident, not a car accident, but he fell in the water as well. He was playing somewhere in the backyard, and nobody saw him. And then somebody, a relative, somebody found him face down in the water, and they rushed him to the hospital, and they tried to revive him, gave him CPR and everything, and nothing happened. The child was, by all intent and purpose, medically speaking, deceased, dead. And after 2 hours of this CPR, 2 hours, he just came back to life like nothing. No damage, nothing at all, no brain damage from the lack of oxygen and so forth. He was perfectly fine. So these are just instances of how, God chooses to intervene into nature or whatnot and rescue certain individuals for whatever reason. We may never know. But it can be difficult to experience something traumatic and question, why God? Why? Why do you allow this evil to take place, this tragedy, this loss of life, and so forth? So it doesn't surprise me that a cleric or minister will have doubt and whatnot. So this minister, he felt that prayer was useless, and in 2011 he quit his job as a pastor and became a building inspector. And when his family saw him photograph with Richard Dawkins on Facebook, his wife left him, his congregation became upset, and he went into foreclosure due to debt because he didn't have a steady income as he had being a pastor. Now, DeWitt rents a home and uses it to house atheistic services, which is interesting. And I will get to that in a bit. He literally preaches to a congregation titled Community Mission Chapel. Furthermore, the CNN report featured an alleged Protestant minister who lost his faith. And he is part of this clergy project, which is a community of current and former clergy who are atheists, but fear revealing that detail due to the fact that their ministry may be their livelihood and they will lose it. So there's this project out there called the Clergy Project that helps so-called ministers out there who are doubting and may leave their faith, but their faith is the only source of livelihood. So if they leave their position as a clergy, they lose their money, their stipend or pension or whatever. And of course, that's not good for them because they will be homeless. And some of them didn't study anything else other than the studies required for their ministry, so they can't apply it to a regular, typical job. So it becomes difficult for them. So concluding with the report, my review of it, it was interesting, but I believe some atheists will disapprove of the reporting. And the reason why is because, as I stated before, the report presents atheism as sort of a parody of religion. That's the way atheism came across to me in the report, that it was like a parody of religion, a satire of religion. And it wasn't this independent ideology that's intellectual, that questions, that reasons, and so forth. It was presented more as almost like a joke, like a counter religion, like the anti religion, but in the sense of the opposite of it, a parody of it. where it imitates religion but it's not religion. Students and former pastors were presented as being chaplains for atheism or humanist communities. I mean, that doesn't make sense. A chaplain for atheism, for atheists, for humanist communities. When you use the word chaplain, you're implying religion, ministry, rituals. So that contradicts atheism, in my opinion. But I have argued many times that atheism, the way it's being presented, is a religious belief in a sense, because it's a set of ideals. And a lot of them are catering to these ideas of chaplains and ministry and whatnot. DeWitt is even running a church like ministry catering to humanists, where he has monetary collections, just like a typical Christian denomination will have. Viewers can see the clear cognitive dissonance of these atheists, where they dislike God and religion, but then present atheism as a religion to their followers. It is just absurd. It's like a parody. Like I said, it's a parody. It makes absolutely no sense. The idea of a humanist chaplain or atheist chaplain is ridiculous. Moreover, the idea of an atheist preacher is laughable. An atheist preaching, I mean, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. An atheism preaching what? Do they have a gospel now? Do they have a Bible, a scripture now? What is the atheist actually preaching? Do you see why it's a parody? They present it as a parody. Not only CNN, but these individual atheists, how they are clearly presenting atheism as a parody, as if it were some religious ideal but not religious idea. So you try to come out with that conclusion to that because it really is ludicrous. And like I said, the show presented atheism like a religion. So I'm not sure how other atheists will take this, as many state that atheism is not a religious movement. The two young people presented clearly are atheists for emotional reasons. And what I mean by that is that, to me, I see something psychological going there. And these two young atheists that were presented, that were showcased in the program, I see an underlying thing there that they forced them to take on atheistic beliefs. And the reason why I say that is, let's take David, for example. David's parents are evangelicals. Now, if you ever come across an evangelical, they're very zealous. They are very in your face. They have this desire to convert people. There's fire in them, and in their services, they get out of control. They start jumping around, singing, crying, holding their hands in the air, flipping around all over the place, talking in tongues, and all kinds of uh, dramatic displays in their services. So this kid, David, his parents are part of this cult, this sect, and they took him to their services, which lasted 6 to 8 hours. I don't know about you, but I will go crazy if I do anything for 6 to 8 hours. I need to have a break. I need to do something else. I mean, call it ADD or whatever you want to call it, but I need to do something else. And I'm sure I could speak for the rest of humanity that we can do something for 6 to 8 hours and not start to become distracted or antsy or whatnot. Studies show that the human mind is, we have a short attention span, and according to, from what I remember from my communications classes in college, we listen to people talking to us, and after about 5 to 15 minutes, our minds start to wander. So when we're sitting somewhere and somebody's talking, like a speech or a sermon or something, or even in class, from 5 to 15 minutes or so, our minds start to go somewhere else. Just starts wandering out there. We start daydreaming. And depending on what the person is talking about, we start applying filters on it. We don't want to hear it. especially if the person starts saying something that we don't like or disagree with. Our mental filters start popping up and we start blocking those. They don't penetrate into the mind, we don't process it. So, can you imagine sitting in a church in a prayer service for 6 to 8 hours? I mean that's a lot. That's just, and especially the way that evangelicals carry out their services, very emotional, very loud, very chaotic. Can you imagine that for 6 to 8 hours? People jumping all over the place, pastors screaming and hollering with their sermons, on the speaking in tongues and all that. And I'm not making fun of that. Just to be clear, I'm not disrespecting any evangelicals out there. I'm just trying to put into perspective how this can affect the human mind in the sense of attention span and becoming anxious and so forth, especially the mind, the psychology of a child. And so he is going through a rebellious stage, in my opinion, as a youth. And like I said, any child will come to dislike something they attend every week for 6 to 8 hours. I mean, don't a lot of kids dislike school after a while? I mean, when they start pre-K or kindergarten, it's all fun the first couple of days, right? You start playing with toys, and it seems like an extension from your home. But then when they start teaching you the ABCs and 1, 2, 3 and how to put sentences together, and when the teachers are yelling at you, put the toy away, put this away. It's not playtime, time out, go to the corner. Then we start to hate it. We say, wait a minute, this pre-K stuff, this kindergarten stuff, it's not so much fun. It's not what I expected. Then when we go to first grade, second grade, third grade, oh my goodness. And we start seeing math and subtractions and division, multiplication, the timetables. What the heck is that? And fractions and verbs and adjectives and adverbs and punctuation and social studies and etc., etc., etc. And then we start to dislike school. A lot of kids do. Because it gets burdensome. And you're there for so many hours listening to these teachers. And a lot of people don't like that. They don't like school. They don't like education, learning. Not because they don't want to learn, but it's just, it gets boring to them. Again, because of that psychological short attention span that we have. So imagine going to church as a child, these evangelical churches or sects and services. I don't call them churches because they're not really churches in the traditional sense, because they're divided. They're divisions from Catholicism, from and even more from Protestantism. But anyhow, so he's a child. He's going through to these services for 6 to 8 hours. I mean, that's a lot for a child. That really is a lot for a child. Even the Catholic Church, a lot of priests are told to, whenever they have a mass with children in them, to try to keep it short. Especially during the sermon, the homily, keep it short, because children start wandering all over the place. Their brains start going all over the place, and this doesn't change into adulthood. So imagine a child or teenager sitting for 6 hours, 8 hours in an evangelical service. Now, David probably as a teen, a young adult, started going through a rebellious stage, the rites of passage. And he starts to distance himself from the social script his parents brought him up with, namely the evangelical script. So atheism is a way for him to feel independent. He is doing his own thing instead of repeating his parents' scripts. Now, Vanessa comes from a Jewish family who survived the Holocaust, as I mentioned before. She claims that, quote, God did not survive the Holocaust, end quote. Now, I thought about these words that she said, and I was trying to figure out what did she mean by that. God did not survive the Holocaust. And I took this as her way of saying that God was not there for the Jews, who were killed during this horrific event. Now, of course, we read in the Old Testament how God seemed to appear there and save the Jewish people, the Hebrews, the Israelites. He would come as a pillar of fire. He drowned the Egyptians. He had the Israelites win battles against enemies and always came to the rescue. So then comes the Holocaust, this crazy guy, Hitler. And he wants to purify the human race and make everybody into these bland, blonde hair, blue eyed people. And he starts targeting Jewish people, Christians, and so forth, the disabled, because they're not quote unquote perfect, genetically perfect. And the Jewish people were probably wondering, where are you, God? Why are you not appearing in the pillar of fire like you did with our ancestors? That we learn about every Passover. We read these stories of the Passover, of the freedom from Egypt, the Exodus. Where are you, God? Why are you not coming to rescue us like you did in the past? So this probably turned off her family from continuing their faith in God. And I remember one of my professors in philosophy, a philosophy course that I took, it was regarding atheism, as a matter of fact, atheism and also existentialism and theism. And we analyzed what atheism is and existentialism and theism. We talk about Nietzsche and Sartre and Kierkegaard and all those wild and crazy guys. And he mentioned he was Jewish, and he mentioned that he gathers every Passover and they have the Seder meal and everything. But it's more like an event, like a cultural thing instead of a religious thing. So he says that his own family, they lost the religious aspect of it, the spiritual aspect of it. To them, it's just, okay, this is something we've been doing for thousands of years. It's part of our culture. Like Thanksgiving, we cook a turkey. There's nothing religious about it. And even though it's named Thanksgiving, we just have a meal. That's what it's all about. So, uh, a fairly good number of Jewish people have fallen to this path where these rituals just became part of culture instead of a religion or an expression of spirituality. So, this is probably why she meant that God did not survive the Holocaust. People lost their faith because they were told all these stories of God coming to rescue them and the Exodus and so forth. Yet 6 million Jews die and nothing. There was no pillar of fire. No Moses from the 1940s appeared and rescued them. Nothing happened. So that's why I say that these two young people are most likely atheists for emotional reasons. David, because he wants to break free of that evangelical hold that his parents put on him. He wants to be his own self. He wants to be independent. He's going through that rebellious stage, trying to figure out who he is. And Vanessa is obviously was raised with that idea that God was not there in the Holocaust. He did not survive the Holocaust. So why worship a God that wasn't there for you, that didn't save you, like he used to save your people back in biblical times? Meanwhile, David, on the other hand, uses his usual appeal to ignorance tactic by claiming that there is no evidence for God. And he says it um, so stern faced, so bluntly, like if he's correct the way he says it, and it's laughable because if you ask him to prove that claim, they get upset and then they start saying that the burden of proof is on you and blah blah blah, all these different nonsense, all this nonsensical arguments. Moreover, he even said that the Bible is not history. Seriously? So how the heck did Israel come to be? Jerusalem, all these places, they were built just for the heck of it. Israel, the places of Israel, the shrines, the areas of Israel exist because of the biblical history, because these things actually happened. And archaeologists find things all the time that correspond to the biblical events. The Temple of Solomon, part of it is still there. So how can Silverman say that the Bible is not history? Now, granted, not all of it is history. Some of it is allegory and poetry and so forth. But overall, it has a history to it, historical value to it. So, I mean, come on. So, did Israel come out of a fairy tale, David? I mean, come on. If so, where's Atlantis? How come we haven't found the city of Atlantis? I mean, it's just ridiculous. You see how this guy is extremely foolish, David Silverman. And it's no wonder why his organization, American Atheists, only has 5,000 members, according to him during the show. He said in the show that the American Atheist has 5,000 members. Or the reporter said that he said that the show has, that rather the American Atheist has only 5,000 members. That's a little bit. I mean, that's 5,000 members. They could probably fit all in a cathedral of some sort. Probably the shrine, the Immaculate Conception Shrine in Washington, D.C., or St. Patrick's Cathedral in Manhattan, New York City. All these atheists from American Atheists could fit in there. That's how little they are. Yeah, atheism is growing according to him. So you try to do the math on that. Atheism is growing, but his group has 5,000 members. Yeah, whatever. And then Silverman presented his atheist TV channel, which was an epic fail. And I wrote about this and spoke about it on Sacerdotus Radio. How the channel has all kinds of crazy parody shows that have these amateur people claiming to be atheists. They don't know what they're talking about. They make all these kinds of fallacious arguments. Aaron Ra and all these cartoonish individuals that pretend to be rationalists and intelligent and whatnot, but they make all kinds of crazy arguments that my mouth just drops when I listen to them, and then they think that they made such a big deal. Like, yeah, I disproved God, I disproved religion. No, you didn't. You just made the dumbest argument ever. So Silverman he's just I don't know, he's just a clown in my opinion. He's just looking for attention. And he also claims that America is not supposed to be under God, or that we're not supposed to trust in God, that God is un-American. I mean, come on. He is clearly ignorant of American history. Our Declaration of Independence clearly mentions God. Clearly. Quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." End quote. This is from the document that our founding fathers made up, telling Great Britain to go itself, if you know what I mean. That we're independent. We're going to be our own people now. The King George, can take his crown and stick it where the sun don't shine. You could take your tea and drown in it. We are American, and we're going to be free. We're going to be independent. So this document, it didn't say it that way, but it declared that we are an independent people, an independent nation, and that we hold these truths. Truths are things that don't change. They're solid. To be self-evident, you don't need a microscope. You don't need the scientific method to figure these truths out. That what? All these men are created equal, and that we are endowed, we are given by our Creator. Who is this Creator? God. God is the Creator. He endows us with certain unalienable rights that can't be taken away. That among these, because there are other rights, but the major ones are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Moreover, the Constitution is even signed in the year of our Lord, which is funny because a lot of atheists claim that the God is not in the Constitution. Yes, he is. Jesus is mentioned, not Jesus Christ, but in the year of our Lord. Anno Domini. Who's Domini? Who's Lord? Christ. That's who they're referring to in the year of our Lord, Jesus Christ. God is as American as apple pie, so to speak. Furthermore, DeWitt is clearly a con artist, in my opinion. He is using his talent for preaching to make money off of atheists, ignorant atheists. How can atheists be so foolish to attend an atheist chapel? Seriously, guys? Atheism means a rejection of God or religious belief, a lack of belief, a lack in belief in God. And it's not supposed to be an imitation of religious belief. They're not supposed to have chapels, chaplains, or churches if they want to be true to the word atheism. And in regards to the anonymous minister, all I can say is that all Christians go through the dark night of the soul, which is a period of spiritual maturation where the soul feels abandoned by God. God seems to not exist. This happens to all of us. We go through these dark nights where we feel that God just disappeared. One minute we feel God, we're in the spirit, and the next minute it's like, well, what happened? And we start to see things dark. That's what they call the dark night of the soul. We would get gloomy. Sometimes we fall into depression. And if you don't control yourself, you fall into a CDA, which is spiritual sloth, where you just don't care anymore. You don't want to practice your religion anymore. Whatnot. So this is what I see in this minister and these other clergy that are part of this clergy project thing. This is completely normal. It's part of the spiritual life. But it's not atheism. It's part of the spiritual life. That's why I say a lot of times that atheism, in a sense, is part of religion. Atheism is part of the spiritual life, in a sense, because of the dark night of the soul. And all saints have gone through this process, and it's what the late Christopher Hitchens misinterpreted in Blessed Mother Teresa's writings when she wrote of her doubts. So Hitchens was writing, commenting on Mother Teresa, saying that she was an atheist, that she was struggling, that the church abused her, that the church forced her to remain in her beliefs, when in fact she was an atheist. No, Christopher Hitchens, you're an idiot. You don't understand what this lady was going through. She was going through the dark night of the soul. It's part of spiritual maturation. Most likely you were going through it, and you didn't know it, Christopher, or you didn't want to admit it. Then we have Richard Dawkins. He then claims that the world will be a better place without religion, but does not acknowledge that Stalin and other atheist leaders hold the record for the most mass murders. Their regimes push atheism and oppress human rights. And there's a great book called Torture for Christ, written by Pastor Wilbrand, who was a Lutheran pastor. He was imprisoned in Romania during Lenin and when communism was taking over. And he describes what these people did, these communists, and how they forced atheism on the people, telling them to deny God and mocking the Christians, saying, worship God, God can't save you. They arrested priests from the Orthodox Church, ministers from different denominations were arrested. They were tortured. They had their nails pulled out of their hands. Some of them were crucified and put on the ground with hundreds of people over them because they were put in small rooms. And these people were left there to stand on these crucified Christians. And they had to do their business on top of them, they urinate and so forth, because there was nowhere to go. They were locked up in these places. and all they had to do was just release themselves right there. And Will Brand himself was placed in these ice boxes, naked, and left there nearly freezing to death, and then he would be quickly pulled out by doctors before he died. And then they warmed him up, only to put him back in the ice box again to make him suffer. And then in the school, the children will be taught to renounce God, saying there is no God, that God is fiction, that God is imaginary, a myth. The same thing we hear atheists today say. That God is a myth. This is what communists were brainwashing the people with back then. The same thing. And it's an interesting book. I recommend all of you listening to read it. It's his account of what was going on in communist Europe, the Eastern Europe during the reign of communism there. And Dawkins was completely mute on that. How communism was pushing atheism on the people and oppressing people, not only religious but other people as well. Today, Cuba and China still oppress their people and commit horrendous crimes in the name of a godless society. They knock down churches that are being built. They force the church to go on the ground. They don't allow the celebration of Christmas. They push for no religion, no God in their schools and the culture of their people. So Dawkins didn't mention any of this, how atheism affects the world negatively via communism and other forms. Dawkins also uses what I call the leprechaun fallacy, which I have refuted in another Sacerdotus Hangouts and also on a blog post, where atheists love to conflate a leprechaun with God. And the whole argument is just nonsense. I'm not going to go into it now because I already did a couple of days ago. But I mean, I feel bad for these individuals who persist in their ignorance. There is some underlying psychological issue going on that forces them to be apprehensive towards God and religion. Now, granted, some believers do horrible things and sometimes do not represent their faith well, yours truly included. However, this is no reason to stop believing. We are all sinners and make mistakes. No religion or faith should be based on the behavior of its followers. Now, the CNN report that aired yesterday gave a glimpse of atheism and what it really is. It is simply a parody of religious belief. We are all predisposed to believe in God. This is part of our genetic makeup. Atheism is the outlier of nature. A claim was made during the report that young people are becoming atheists or leaving religion because of the internet. Now, this may be or may not be true. But this may be because the internet is full of so much misinformation that it is hard to verify what is factual and what is not. I mean, how many times atheists on Twitter and so forth send me memes or images of the founding fathers of the United States with things they never said or things that Carl Sagan never said. And they actually believe that Carl Sagan and the founding fathers of America said these things or wrote these things, and they never did. They never bothered to quote check, to quote to verify where they got their information from. They don't bother to do that. So you have all these young people viewing these memes and blogs and all that, and they get brainwashed, they get confused, and they don't bother to do research. I mean, one young person likes to do research, honesty. So there are many sites out there on the internet, like Wikipedia, who anybody could edit, blogs that people write, and they try to present off as academic, and the like, with fabrications and other distortions. I mean, there's so many atheist blogs out there that distort so many things and present it in such a way that it comes across as academic or valid when it's not. An educated person reads these atheist blogs and they see it as BS, it's nonsense. So, for a good example of that is Somebody released a news article claiming that Stephen Hawking said that intelligent design happened. Now, immediately when I saw that, I extremely doubted it because I know Stephen Hawking's writings. I've read his books, and I know that he's more of an agnostic. And sometimes he says things that sound atheistic, but he's more of an agnostic. And this news article is on the World News Daily Report. It looks like a legitimate site, World News Daily Report. And it says this: Stephen Hawking admits intelligent design is highly probable. And a lot of people are falling for that fake news and believing it. So, this is an example of how careful we must be when searching for things on the internet. Young people are impressionable and will believe anything that may be presented as cool or hip or rebellious. Atheism is a rebellious social phenomenon. We can't deny that. So it is attractive to young people, of course, who want to go against the status quo. So atheism, in a sense, is like a bad boy movement. And teenagers, young people, they want to be bad boys, bad girls. They want to be rebellious. They want to do something different than their parents did or than what society does. They want to break that script that they were given by society. So when they see these atheist ideas and blogs and sites and videos and all that, they say, "Oh, that's cool. This person is going against religion, and religion is dominant in the world. It's going against politics or the dominant party or not. So it's cool." So they get brainwashed and they start adopting all these crazy atheist ideas without really clearly pondering the nonsense that atheism espouses. Now, this show reminded me one of the reasons why I left it behind. It's silly. Atheism is just an opium for the contrarian. It gives them something to say against God or religion, something. They don't even bother to analyze what they're saying. It is based on speculative reasoning that fails to sustain itself logically. And I believe that 100%, that atheism doesn't have no ground, no structure. It comes off as cool and rebellious, but when you break it down to the nitty gritty, it really doesn't make any sense. It's a lot of guessing, a lot of speculation, a lot of bare assertions. Okay, I lack belief in God. Why? I just do. Why? The burden is on you. Why are you asking me? You're the one that believes in God. So you tell me why you believe. Or, I don't believe in God. God doesn't exist. Why? He just doesn't exist. There's no evidence. But we have the nature and this, and you can see the universe is mathematical. Mathematics comes from an intelligent mind. That's not evidence. But this is what physicists use to describe things in nature. They use mathematics. Yeah, but that's science. But the same thing is used for God. But that's not science. So it's all this crazy argumentation back and forth that goes nowhere. And the atheist becomes this contrarian, just saying anything just to defend atheism, but doesn't really think of what he or she is saying. And when the atheist is questioned on atheism, okay, why do you lack belief? Why do you say there is no God? They don't know what to say. They start shifting the burden. Well, you're the one that believes in God, so you tell me why you believe. Or, okay, there's no God because there's no evidence. Or the funny one that I love that atheists like to say is, well, we don't know how the universe started, and that's okay. That's okay to not know. But we know it wasn't God. I mean, that's a fallacious statement because if you don't know what created the universe or what started the universe, but you know it wasn't God, then that means you know what started or created the universe. Because otherwise you wouldn't be saying it wasn't God because you know what it was. So how can you say that we don't know what created the universe, but we know it wasn't God? I mean, you can see the ridiculous arguments that atheists posted that Makes absolutely no sense at all. Well, at least religion has arguments. I mean, some of them might be weak, some of them might be strong. Granted, no religion is going to present to you God sitting on a throne before them any more than a historian could present to you George Washington or Abraham Lincoln or Thomas Paine before you, a living corpse talking to you and saying, "Hello, I'm George Washington." All we have are just circumstantial evidence that pieces the puzzle together. So we religion is strong in regards to religion to evidence rather in that regard, is that at least we could present these circumstantial pieces evidence that paints the whole picture or part of the picture, whereas the atheist has nothing. They don't have nothing to stand on. Oh, you can't prove a negative. I mean, come on. You're gonna be chasing your own tail for the rest of your life. You want the world to leave religion behind. You want the world to leave God behind. To you, it's superstition, it's a fairy tale, whatnot. But you don't give solid reasons why. Instead, you just switch the burden around. You believe in God, so you tell me. You have to provide evidence. The burdens are proof on you. You have to provide proof. So atheism, it lacks substance. Nobody can work with it. It's an irrational position. Even though it presents itself as rational, it's an irrational position because it can't defend itself. It can't formulate strong arguments other than I lack belief. There's no evidence. And then when you try to break down that those assertions, those claims, it goes nowhere. Many times they get upset and they just want to argue with you, or they start calling you a troll just because you want to get to the bottom of why they lack belief or why they confirm or think that there is no God. So the CNN show demonstrated clearly how comical atheism is, and especially the parts where it was presented as a religion. I mean, a chapel, an atheist chapel, atheist chaplain. I mean, come on, give me a break. Makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And it's just a mockery of a religion in a sense, a satire of religion. It's like a social satellite like night life of religion. That's what it is, atheism. And luckily, according to the Pew study, atheism has the lowest retention of any religion, any social group. So people become atheists, yeah, they stop believing, but after a while they come back. They start believing again. And we see this all the time. Every year the Catholic Church gets thousands, millions worldwide of atheists who came back for whatever reason. And many times it was on their own. Nobody went to them. No priest went to preach to them. Nobody went to preach to them. They just came to the conclusion that atheism was nonsense. And didn't make any sense whatsoever. So they decided to become Catholic. And we're going to receive a lot of them throughout the world in about 2 weeks on the Easter Vigil. There's going to be atheists coming into the Catholic Church, being baptized, receiving confirmation, Holy Eucharist. So hopefully you were able to see the CNN special, and I'm looking forward to seeing the responses that other atheists who viewed it give to the show, because coming from an atheist background myself, I wouldn't have liked the show because, like I said, it presented atheism like a parody, like a movement trying to imitate religion. And I'm not too sure that that's what atheists want to do. I don't think they want to present atheism in that way. But that's how it's coming across because of Dawkins and people like David Silverman and Cherry DeWitt, etc., who present atheism as this religious thing that doesn't have a God, that a religion is focused on man, on himself, and whatnot. So that's all I have now for now. So thank you for listening. God bless and Mary keep.